Hello there, this is Dr. David Amakobe of African Root Incorporated. This morning I'm going to go to the World Trade Center of Delaware. We have a meeting there to discuss the business opportunities and financing opportunities that are available for export, and also EXIM Bank, how it is reducing the risk in international trade. So I'll be bringing you those videos, and together with the ones that I brought that from the U.S. Commercial Services and U.S. Trade and Development Agency, that should be able to help you make a decision how to do business with the United States if you're an African, into Africa or into the U.S.
EXIM right now is under the leadership of Rita Jo Lewis. She is the second woman to run the bank in its 86-year history, and also the first minority to run the bank. I've had the opportunity to travel with Chair Lewis. She is a dynamic personality, to say the least. I know some of you have actually had the opportunity to see her actually speak at the National Debt Conference. She pretty much let everybody know that EXIM is here to stay and what we'll be doing going forward to try to maintain our place in the marketplace. And one of the ways we're doing that, we introduced the Make It More in America plan. This is the first plan, new plan EXIM has introduced in more than 15 years. The last plan was our express credit insurance, which is one of the great products we use right now. Now, to make it a more American plan, quite simply, it's going to provide funding for companies as long as they guarantee that 15% of their actual product or service will be exported. Now, the great part about that is, from a medium and long-term standpoint, it really hits home. Now, from a smaller business standpoint, you can look from the supply chain piece, working with that particular company who's doing that. So it basically hits everybody where it needs to in terms of what we need to do. Now, there's still gaps. There's still things we need to do across the board. Did I do that? Because I hadn't gone to that piece yet, that's it. So there's basically gaps that we still need to work on. You know, our delegated lenders, our insurance brokers are all part of this particular program, where we continually try to make sure we're making everything available. The mindsets of people right now are a little bit different than they were 2 years ago in terms of what's important in life. So one of the things we need to look at is making sure we offer them as many resources as possible to be able to make those choices easier from an EXIM standpoint. Now, from a minority business standpoint, I'll talk a little bit about what we do there. The office has been around 20 years. The goal of the Minority and Women-Owned Business Division within EXIM is to make sure that we take care and look at how we can help minorities, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, people with there you go, people with disabilities. And the goal of that particular division is to not only help you, but also nurture you in the right direction. And being a member of the REPP program as well, and running that particular program, knowing what resources to talk to, knowing where your local MBDA office is, knowing what particular person can actually help you get there. There are grants available throughout states, making sure the STEP grant is utilized in particular states, and state grants. These are some of the things that the Minority and Women-Owned Business Division does to make sure that those individuals get what they need to be successful. You might not be ready to export, but let's put you on the path to export by making sure you know where actually that front door is to the house. Instead of going in the side and trying to figure out how to get in, let's make sure you actually do that. And that's what 6 individuals do on a daily basis. They do it through webinars, in-person speaking engagements, conversations. Do we basically say, hey, you know, I'm starting out, what do I need to do? The first thing you need to do is understand that exporting is a journey. It's not something you're gonna do overnight. It's gonna take diligence, it's gonna take patience, and you're gonna have some money. And that's the key point. And also making sure people understand the financial aspect. As a reform banker, understanding that they have to know that their actual resources need to be available in terms from a financial standpoint. Having that hard conversation. Don't say you're a $200,000 company on paper, and when you get the financials, you're really $100,000. That makes it for a very tough conversation. You know, making sure they understand that you actually have to pay that tax bill in order to show that you do have that revenue. I know we all try to minimize as many taxes as possible, small businesses, but we need to make sure we have viable information so a banker can make an informed decision that you can pay back this loan. So that's an important part. Now, let's talk a little bit about what EXIM does on a daily basis. Is it right here?
Is that touch
Yeah,
screen?
you can do the,
Enter?
yeah.
Oh, look at that. Now,
It's too much.
you know what? Let's do it old school. I'm part of the crowd. So, EXIM Bank. You take a look at what we do with the actual official export credit agency for the United States. One of 100 ECAs across the world. Now, we're designed to fill in the gaps. We're not trying to compete with the private insurance companies, but there's reasons we need to be there to make sure everybody has an opportunity to grow from an export perspective. We level the playing fields. Everybody knows ECAs across the world. Matter of fact, China has 3. And from a state control perspective, you know, that's a whole different ballgame with the way they do things. So it's important that EXIM is an important part of American trade and the fabric of helping everyone. Equity, diversity, inclusion are important. As we talked about with the minority and women-owned division, we've been doing this for 20 years. Basically, over the course of the past, let's say 3 or 4 years, that's become a bigger piece of the puzzle. But we've been here all along doing it, making sure those minority companies get an opportunity and information they need to be successful. You can't say things once and everybody get it 2 or 3 times. Having people understand where you're coming from, having people trust you and understand. I'm giving you the correct information. You may not want to hear it, but it's the information you're going to need to be successful. Why should you export? 3 simple reasons. Access to more consumers. Everybody's seen the 95% stat becomes that 95% of people live outside the United States. So that's where your customers lie, not within the United States, but outside the United States. And considering what we're going through right now from an economic standpoint, diversifying your portfolio is extremely important. Not having all your apples in that one basket. Market opportunities. Opposite, say it for itself. More markets. Minority-owned businesses are uniquely qualified. The reason they are, they have connections overseas, whether it be from a family standpoint or connections they've had otherwise. That's why it's important for them to export. As we said, 95% outside the United States. That graphic is so telling. Because as we sit in this room today, we would not think that most people do not know outside of the trade community how important that statistic is. Simple 4-letter word, risk. If you're risk averse, it's an opportunity to export there. But the reason we exist, as well as other private insurance exist, is to help eliminate that risk by making sure you're able to sleep at night. As I said, we're making the playing field, we're minimizing risk. Supplemental financing. Now, the supplemental financing piece comes to a point where we talk about it making more an American plan we have coming, we're working with. Also, additionally, with our working capital guarantees, we even do direct loans to businesses outside the United States which are buying American-made products and services. It's not a small percentage, but we still will work with companies. Our working capital guarantee. You'll hear a little bit more later about working capital guarantees and how EXIM works with those. But basically, we are not the actual lender. We basically just guarantee the loan and make sure it's available. Now, as I was talking with one of my colleagues a little bit earlier, people want to give the money away. We want to make sure this money is available. We have to people have to be in the mindset to accept that money. And that's what we talk about. People's mindsets are a little different now when it comes to anything in the world today. So make sure when we're talking with individuals on helping them understand what we can help them, that we put them in the right headspace. 90% guarantees, and in some cases up to 95 now. That's something we changed about 2 years ago, depending on the situation and also depending on the type of loan you're looking at getting. Of course, when it's guaranteed by the federal government, your rates are gonna be a lot better than just basically going out and asking, you know, can I get a loan that's 13 or 14%? And we all know what happened last week with the Fed, and what's probably gonna continue to happen. Quite simple, how does it work? You wanna export, your accounts receivable desired. You apply for a working capital loan. They process your loan under working capital criteria, and we have what we call delegated lenders, we'll talk about a little bit later, which has EXIM's criteria built in. Their goal is to make sure that they have a guarantee of such as EXIM, which will help you get the loan based on the criteria, and also get you a better rate. Now, the bread and butter of EXIM existence, of course, is the export credit insurance. That's what we're known for across the world, making sure we eliminate the risk by providing export credit insurance. And for those of you in the room, the quickest way to explain export credit insurance is this. We all have car insurance and home insurance, right? Right?
Yeah.
Do you ever want to file a claim?
No.
Because you're scared the rate's gonna go up, correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
Now, with export credit insurance, this is designed in case somebody doesn't pay you. It's not those times when you want to actually file a claim. If you have to file a claim, it's available. So actually, you can actually export without credit insurance. You can also drive without car insurance. Both of them are very dangerous, but why take that risk when you basically have the availability of export credit insurance? Now, the three key points about export credit insurance that everybody talks about, of course, the risk piece. Secondary, being able to sell on terms. If you have an export credit insurance policy and you travel outside the United States, and you're able to offer credit terms on the spot, it's a lot easier to make that sale. Because I guarantee the other countries around the world are equipping their exports with the same type of information of being able to say, I can make this deal, I can do net 30, I can do net 60, I can do net 120. Having that export credit card in your pocket, by having export credit insurance gives you that ability. And of course, the financial aid piece. You're able to sign those receivables to a bank and borrow against them. So that's a 3-in-1 tool with export credit insurance. And the great part about that export credit insurance, you only pay when you ship. So if you're not shipping for 2 months, you don't have a premium to pay for 2 months. And something the SBA's allow a lot of states to do is actually utilize the export credit insurance within the STEP grant. Now, every state is on board with that yet. I know the STEP applications are being processed at the SBA as we speak right now. So hopefully every state will get on board with this. It's absolutely a great opportunity where you're able to pay your premiums and actually ask your state to actually pay for your actual premiums. Now, how many people would love to have their car insurance premium paid and or their home owners paid by someone else? And if you have teenagers, really, and you really want to pay.
That's right.
This is quite simply how export credit insurance works. You identify an international buyer. You obtain the export credit insurance policy by working through one of our brokers. You'll hear from a little bit later. You offer your credit terms, net 60, net 90, whichever is both buyer. Buyer accepts your terms. You ship your product, invoice them. They pay, that's absolutely great. If they don't pay, you're able to follow the criteria and file a claim. Now, filing a claim is something that's not looked upon in a bad way. Some of our greatest success stories, we use EXIM as actually file claims. Because things are out of your control. In terms of they couldn't pay based on something economic happening within the country. And we all see right now, things turn around in an instant when you turn on the news. You went to bed, something was one way, you got up, something's totally different the next day. There's nothing we can do about that. So these are the things that make sure we eliminate the risk with export credit insurance. Now, this is one of our success stories I want to talk about, called acoustic sheet, sleep headphones. Have anybody ever seen them?
I've heard of it.
Now, Dr. Wee Shin Shin is actually actually started working with us because she had been burned. If I remember correctly, she was burned almost $100,000 when she didn't get payment. So she became an export credit customer. She now is women-owned business, She exports to 3 countries. She uses our export credit insurance and also our working capital guarantee to make sure business stays solid and keep working. Now, she's been with us since 2017. One of the examples I didn't provide up here is, has anybody ever seen a little small ball called Buzz Balls? You can buy at a liquor store. You seen them? Okay, that's a woman-owned company out of Texas. We'll have a success story coming up with her relatively soon. But she started making it out of her garage. She was actually a teacher, and she decided she wanted to expand and do a little bit more. She utilized the SBA and their working capital loans. Now it's a multi-million-dollar company exporting to 27 countries across the world. And it's actually, alcohol it's basically, it survives everything. It survives recessions, depressions. It survives COVID. You know? So business is actually booming right now for that particular organization. And I think we're back at the end. Yeah. So at this particular point, I'd like to take any questions, any comments you may have in regards to EXIM. Want to keep this brief, but I want to make sure we have time. Yes, sir.
So I understand we've been focusing on export, but do we have something for imports?
The SBA actually can give you some help with imports. And the reason we have export in our name, in 1935, we were doing imports and exports. And because of the fact we imported something within the country, it hurt the American economy. And one of the goals of EXIM is to make sure we increase American jobs by utilizing export. So believe me, if it's something we can work with, and it would be easy if they changed our name. Of course, that would be an act of Congress. So that's a whole nother story. But unfortunately, we only support exports at this time.
Charles Fulforth, Airborne Data Imagery Group. In the export business, I'm located in Philadelphia, and one of my concerns for the manufacturers that we're the government administration armed for is our products are petroleum based, the weight, the shipping costs. Can you tell me a little bit about shipping costs for manufactured products throughout Europe and Africa?
I could prefer to someone, unfortunately, EXIM doesn't get involved with that particular piece of it. We leave that to the freight forwarders.
Excuse me, yeah, that would be more of a freight forwarder, customs broker question. So if you're working, let's say, with a freight forwarder here in Delaware or in Philadelphia, a shipping company or logistic company, they will give you advice in terms of cost, in terms of costing of per containers, outbounds, markets, because every market is different.
And the customs regulations?
Yeah, of course, they'll know.
EXIM help or the freight forwarder?
The freight forwarder will help you because they know the regulations of in-country where you're exporting to, okay? And they will also know the risk involved. Because
Yes.
there may be, of course, a country that, I mean, if we're trying to export to Ukraine, I'm sure it can be done, in some ways, and there will be sure there will be done, I can guarantee you that, because obviously the US government is doing it as we speak. So there are ways, there are freight forwarders that specialize in a particular niche, but that will be basically the sector that you would need to approach. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Yeah, and to add something to that, you mentioned the word Ukraine. Now, EXIM is only open in 186 countries. We cannot provide support countries that are not listed in our country limitation listing. I can give everybody a link to that, because if you look at the fact, we're basically working with your tax dollars every day. We need to be very prudent of how we utilize those tax dollars. So each country has an associated risk that's actually aligned with it. For instance, probably the cheapest country to actually export to is Canada, along with Mexico. Some other countries they can be steep based upon what's going on in that particular country. Yes, sir.
Are there lingering effects of COVID, and are certain countries problematic on that list because of their management of COVID?
There can be, and that is something that's taken into account when when the insurance underwriters are looking at those particular countries. Now, of course, everybody's handling COVID in a different way from a country perspective. Is there a right way to handle it? Absolutely, but there's also been ways where we know trade has to happen. I.e., we need to get baby formula in this country. I can't believe we ran out of baby formula, but that's a whole other conversation. So it is important that we utilize those particular types of information. And we have investigators who actually help. And what we've also done is bring back our global business development division at EXIM Bank. It was going for about 5 years, and now it's returned under the leadership of Chair Lewis. And what we're looking to do is to make sure we expand our ability to work with countries outside the United States. Because right now, the only thing we were working with was through our overseas contacts with U.S. Department of Commerce. Now we have the ability to work through EXIM as well. Yes, sir.
Mohammed Sise, I have a practical scenario I want to run through you.
Okay.
A business partner of mine in 2 countries in West Africa need fertilizer. I'm struggling to find it in the US, so I have to source it from either Turkey or other countries. They process a bank verification with my bank and send a letter of credit, and I'm about to begin receiving money here in the US, purchased from somewhere else. How do I get into any type of operation with EXIM?
It's not produced in the United States, basically.
If I could have, to all of you here, I need NPK, I need urea, anyone, if you know anyone who has some in the storage, please have me on the side. I'm ready for it. If it was here, I'd be happy to get it from here. It's the safest way for me to do business. Unfortunately, my client is ready. I don't have a product on the US market. I have to find it somewhere else. So I'm trying to understand, given the protection that EXIM is providing, how do I secure my partner's money, secure my own profit, and deliver the commodity without problem?
I'll speak to that. So EXIM's requirement is that the products get shipped out of the United States. And so if that condition is not being met, then obviously you can't apply for coverage. But the private sector markets don't have that kind of conditionality. So if you're shipping out of China or Turkey or wherever, the private sector carriers will accommodate that, and you can ensure that trade transaction.
Also, if I may add, the EXIM Bank obviously has that restriction that 51% is going to be made in the USA. However, the gentleman here was asking about the sourcing of some materials, supplies being come from overseas. So the SBA, the Small Business Administration, does not have that concern, regardless of the content. However, if you're producing, let's say, an end unit, a finished product, and you require raw materials, parts, components from overseas, those can be transshipped into the US. As long as you use those to finish your product, okay? Make it all together, one finished product with foreign materials, then the SBA will allow you to finance that. Basically, will allow you to finance those foreign receivables from your buyer, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. There's something I also want to mention about that, but anyway, I'll come back.
But if you can get it up to 50%, it can be considered an indirect export where EXIM can help. So you need to bring it up in terms of what the actual doing, as Dino was saying, Francisco was saying, doing something additionally to it. So that is a possibility, and we do indirect exports.
Yeah.
Carla wanted to add something.
Yeah, well, and it occurred to me in terms of your question, are you asking also about financing for shipping costs?
Yes.
Okay, why don't we let?
Yeah, I mean, if you have, in reality, what happens is that if you're selling overseas, right? And so if you're selling overseas to a foreign buyer, you're gonna produce an invoice, correct?
Yes.
And so the invoice then will detail, the cost of the goods, the cost of shipment, and then we'll give you like, let's say, a CIF, cost insurance of freight price, right? So then you can turn that invoice over to a bank and have that financed, depending on the ratios. Because obviously we work, if you have a working capital line of credit for short-term financing, and EXIM Bank is in the picture, that's a 90% coverage. So the ratio, the advance ratio of a bank to advance money to you on the foreign receivable, on that commercial invoice, could be as high as 90%. But, you know, they also have, EXIM Bank also has the small exporter insurance coverage, which it could go even as high as 95%.
Export credit, right.
Yeah, you know, in some cases. I mean, we'll have to be analyzed.
Individual
Yeah,
conversations we have to have based on the country you're actually exporting to and the
One
financial
of the
situation.
186 countries.
In most countries that are actually, most countries that we actually export to, we have a good relation with, we have people on the ground that we can also assist in making sure. But the key is having those initial conversations and let's setting the baseline of how we can help or what other resources we can provide. As you can see, as I was talking today, 2 great resources actually stepped up and added to those conversations. And one thing about people who are new to exporting is listening to all the information around them and making sure they're taking that all in. Because it can be a daunting process. I'm not gonna lie to anybody who's not exporting. Exporting can be a daunting process. You need to persevere. You need to make sure you do your research and communicate with your resources around you to make it easier. Every conversation takes something away from it. That's the important part about it. Sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, it came back to me. You know, I've been doing it for 45 years now, so, or something like that. So when you buy those materials from overseas, right? And you know that you're gonna export the stuff out of the country, make sure you get an exemption. Because otherwise you're gonna be paying import duties on those imports. You get an exemption and you need to let the government know, you know, that there's an exempt because you have a contract with a foreign buyer, okay?
So our products are of food products, so I mean there is an import duty, but not as much. I think maybe 2 or 4%.
Okay.
Which so coming back to your question is about the export. So since this is our new company, so we basically import spices and lentils. So start with this USA, and definitely will be reaching out to the first neighboring countries, that is of Canada and Mexico. So definitely will be exporting as well, but at this point we were some kind of looking at a hand who can help us to grow for the financing, and definitely we can export as well.
That's perfectly fine. I mean, you know, we do see a lot of companies that do imports and exports, and we have a lot of commercial bankers over here that do both the financing on the import side, on the export side. I think what you need to make sure that you have to realize is that you have enough comfortable margins that you can go in, import the stuff, pay your duties, and then when you sell, you know, out of the country, you got enough margins that will cover all that and add your profit margin on top of that. So if you feel comfortable with that, because you've done your analysis, you know the market in Canada, you know the market in Mexico, and they can take that price, you know, from you, then obviously you got a formula that can succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a new brand, something which we are registered, incorporated, is being registered with the registered trademark. So it's an I would say retail business kind of it. You know, it's everything is in pack overseas, and establishing a trademark, the huge big trademark made in USA. So there is a markup, and the same time you are getting by exporting also, you are pretty much like, you know, have a reasonably good markup.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I could just add something on bringing things in and exporting, essentially transship or indirect, all of that kind of thing. I would also, we did a program a couple years ago with Patty Cannon from the state on foreign trade zones, and Delaware has a unique situation. The entire state is a foreign trade zone. We're foreign trade zone 99. I don't know why I remember that. But in any case, if you are bringing things in, working on it, and then shipping it right back out, you will want to know about foreign trade zones. And it's used in a variety of industries, from agriculture to pharmaceutical industry uses it, research. So there are a lot of things, and we can put those of you who are bringing things in, working on it, and then exporting the finished product, or a piece of what you're doing, we can put you in touch with the Foreign Trade Zone folks. Also, the Port of Wilmington, for those of you who are importing, particularly food products or food items, know that the Port of Wilmington is the only port in the entire United States with USDA APHIS inside the port gates. It's the only one. It also has the largest dockside cold storage in the entire United States, more than Long Beach, New Orleans, Houston, the big ports you think of. We specialize in all of that. So for those of you on the ag side, on any importing, we will put you in touch with the people at the port who specialize in this. So, and the other thing on terms of regulations in different countries, there are over 320 World Trade Centers, and we can put you, if you're having difficulty in a particular location in a country, we can put you in touch with the local World Trade Center. And when you're a member of World Trade Center Delaware, you're a member of the whole association, and other World Trade Centers can help you.
There's that communication piece right there, and being able to connect you, helping you know which door to go in.
Yep.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, it took so long.
Hi, my name is Gaylord Neal. I'm an executive with a company called CUNY Spotlight Ecosystem, like Rainforest Ecosystem. We develop software platforms for companies and do a lot of branding and marketing for companies outside of the country that are trying to bring their products to the U.S. And we help them get set up. We build the platforms for them to communicate back and forth with retailers and wholesalers. We've been burned a few times where we've developed the platforms and they didn't finish paying us. Is there some way that we could work with EXIM to help us facilitate those payments?
Absolutely, we do services as well, and that's one of the biggest misnomers people don't understand. Services is an export as well. This is performed by American citizens for foreign distribution. It's a situation where you also extend like a service contract with it as well. All that can be covered.
Just to jump on that point, that the endorsement, there's a special endorsement that covers services. So when you read the policy, you'll see nothing that speaks to services. So if you go through the process of using EXIM Bank, you want to definitely work with somebody that will bring that into the policy. Okay. Policy on a standalone basis covers products.
Give me an idea of percentage-wise and what it would cost us for a contract of, say, $1 million in services.
It all depends. It all depends on the particular country. It all depends on the particular country.
Okay. Well,
So,
pick a country.
Off the top of my head, some of the lowest rates we have is maybe 65 cents per 100, and that with an export credit with our Export Express. So, for instance, on some $10,000 policies, and don't quote me on this because a lot of particulars go into it. It could be on $10,000. It could be as low as $165.
Okay.
Yeah, the standard rate for 60 days and below in open account terms is 55 cents. So for every million in sales, that's $5,500. Some of the multi-buyer programs can be in the 20s if you have a deductible.
Okay.
Very, very economical.
Yeah, so it's a lot of decisions that go into making sure your policy. And please stand up and introduce yourself, because one of the ways EXIM is able to do what we do across the United States, because we only have 350 employees. We're responsible for the entire United States. And one of the ways we're able to make sure we help everybody and make sure we provide the correct information is utilizing our brokers. They're an integral part of what we do on a daily basis. They're the first stop when you need a question in regards to your policy, because they basically sit down with you, take a look at the whole portfolio and how they can help. Because there are times when EXIM is not the solution. Sometimes solution is a private insurer.
Sure.
EXIM is not here to compete with the private industry. We're here to supplement where the actual private industry cannot help. Then it's the way EXIM steps in. So that's why our brokers are extremely important to the way we do business and making sure that the customers that EXIM even works with are taken care of.
So one more example. So we're given to do some business with a couple companies in South Africa that want to bring their health and wellness products to the U.S. And we're going to help them distribute them, find the retailers and the wholesalers to work through. In building out our pricing, our cost structure to those companies, we want to be able to build in the EXIM cost to be able to cover that relationship and that contract.
But you're importing it into the country.
Yes.
Right, we only work on exports.
I know, but our services to those companies,
Okay.
that's our service.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. I just heard going back.
We want to protect our service
Okay.
to those companies.
I'd use 50 basis points.
Okay.
I mean, I could get you the specific rate for South Africa,
Yes.
but, you know, if you put in 100 basis points, you'd probably make money.
Okay.
But I'll be honest with you, exporting to Africa is not cheap. I'll be honest with you, some countries have a more associated risk with it, and because we're playing with the money that you work for every day as taxpayers, we have to be prudent in the way we make those decisions.
Yeah.
It's not something we do generally across the board. EXIM is usually the first person in a country to assist, the last person out.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there collateral on this loan? Is it based on the company's asset or based on your fiscal property?
Now, from a working capital guarantee standpoint,
Yeah, I mean, definitely there could be collateral also for the loan. Is it based on company's asset or based on the export value what you export?
It can be both.
Both.
It could be both, because obviously, it will depend exactly on the balance sheet of your company, right? The equity of your company and so forth. So it could be a scenario where we may be doing like, and I know we've done some of it ourselves as a bank, where we just based the financing on the receivables. So it's more like an asset-based double lending scenario, formula, credit. So we basically base ourselves on the collateral of the receivables, right, that you have. But if you come across a situation where there may be collateral shortfall, or there may not be enough collateral for you, let's say to get yourself $1 million line of credit, then we'll base ourselves not just on that, but we base ourselves on the assets of the company as well, and the equity that you have in the company, the profitability and so forth. So what I'm trying to say is that we are flexible, we can work with you, but we need to see the numbers, right? We need to see the numbers in order to give you the best solution, the best structure that we can possibly give you, that you feel comfortable with, right? You need to feel, because it's a two-way street, right? You know, you gotta feel comfortable with what we're giving you, and we gotta feel comfortable with you. So we kind of negotiate and find a medium to make you happy. And does that answer your question?
Yeah, okay.
And Eric, in his presentation, drove home the point that international receivables on a balance sheet are often not financed. So when the banks look at that asset, they typically don't apply an advance rate. So when you wrap it with insurance, you can walk in and talk to Fulton Bank or any bank, and they're more apt to finance it. So it's an asset on the balance sheet. Once it's wrapped with insurance, you can go get capital, working capital.
Thanks.
yeah, that's why it's important to have these type of conversations early and understand when you're going to sit down with Fulton, having all your ducks in a row so that you understand what you're actually trying to do, and you're not coming in unprepared. And that is one thing I can say to new exporters: come in prepared. Do your homework, speak to individuals like at the World Trade Center who can take a look at your export packet and see if it does make sense, if it's something that's valuable. Because a lot of people can get that email from overseas and say they like it, oh, I love your product, I love it, can you send me, 10,000 units? Really? So it's an opportunity to really have those conversations, to really hone down on what it takes to be successful from an export standpoint. There's government resources available, there's federal resources available, there's even resources you can pay for available. I would exhaust all your unpaid ones first, but it's still, it's something you do need to get information for. Export plan. And the SBA does a great job of providing you information in regards to, with SBDCs as well across the United States, helping you with that export plan. Just don't go send your product, you know, after that email over and wait for a payment. You'll never get it.
Eric,
Yes.
Niraj Bhatt, is there another program? Is there a program, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but where EXIM will finance the construction of a project or the development of a project in another country if there's US content going to that, for that project?
It can be regarded within structure, within our project finance division.
Right.
But that is a lot of variables that go into that. Now, depending on that type of project, US used to be called, OPEC, now it's, yeah, they're structured to work with products over, actually, not products, but also, projects overseas, which is gonna enhance the actual, information and structure of that particular company. And I can provide you with the name of the individual in DC. It's US Development, it's US Finance and Development.
What is that?
DFC.
Development Bank?
Yeah, US,
EFC?
Yes.
DFC is now, yeah.
Development Finance Corp?
That's the new wing. It used to be called OPEC.
USID, you know.
So it's an opportunity there.
Project finance
Yeah,
arm of our government.
yeah.
I thought that was through EXIM, that we're EXIM had a program, like if there was, I don't know.
We have some as well, but there's another division. That's their primary goal, is to work in that particular.
Also some connections that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Allison is my contact.
Yeah, she's been here.
Okay.
A couple years.
Yeah.
There's another gentleman, Craig O'Connor.
Craig O'Connor at our bank.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
you know, some of the agencies do dual things, we both of them do it, but from a standpoint, we wanna make sure you have all the information, which would work better in terms of what's available, to you and your organization. XM might be the best fit, DFC might be the best fit, just in some cases, private insurance is the better fit than XM credit insurance. So it's all about knowing the resources and taking advantage of them based on all the information you're presented with. I'll never just say XM is the only thing in town. No, we're not. Because, you know, unfortunately, we have gaps. New to exporters, we don't do a lot with them, and that's something I really hate. I wish we could do more with people who are really just starting to get in the export space. But, you know, unfortunately, we're looking for people with 1 to 3 years of export experience already, or a viable product. Now, if you've been doing something for 20 years at your previous job, and you start your own company and you're doing the same exact thing, we can utilize that type of actual experience. But that is something that needs to be written up, needs to be justified, and really worked on, and make sure we can actually make it work. Once again, I said we're basically, you know, controlling your money from my budget standpoint. So we have to be on point with what our decisions we make, because we are held accountable to Congress with a report every year. And if it's not to the liking, you know, we can, basically, EXIM is what they call a sunset agency. We have to be reauthorized every couple of years, and right now, we had a 7-year authorization that former Chairman Reed put in place. It's the longest authorization we've ever had, and hopefully, you know, government sees fit to keep you working. 87 years in the process. So the process works. Just a matter of making sure we're doing the right thing with the process.
Eric, how would EXIM support the protection of, or does it, of intellectual property?
Absolutely. It can be written into your actual document in terms of that. Now we have to do the research on that intellectual property and make sure you have the right patents on that particular property. Make sure it's not leased anywhere else, and we can work with you. And that's something you work with our broker as well as the loan officer on to make sure that we can actually do something in regards to that.
We have time for just one last question before we break.
Yes.
Quick question, so the inexperienced exporters, someone just getting into it, where would they go for help?
Export credit insurance?
Yeah.
If we couldn't provide, I would turn them over to one of our brokers, and maybe they can work a private policy with them.
So,
Is that difficult for
the
you?
private sector carriers also underwrite the applicant, just like EXIM does. And, we would just have to walk them through the journey as Eric's talked about. But the process with trade credit is really debtor-centric or buyer-centric, but to some degree, you have to be a qualified applicant.
And on the lending side, we work the same way. So we scale, so it can be a large credit or a large loan, and we also do a small loan. So we do have, we do the bank, but
another big piece, preparation, as Dino was saying. UEI, how many people are familiar with that? I know y'all. I've heard what's going on.
We got heavy dose.
The reason I mention that is because of the fact it's an important piece the government just put in place as of April 1st, that all businesses basically doing business with the United States government has to have that number as well. EXIM, you still have to have a DUNS number, because that's basically your social security number for your credit. So it's important that you actually have that number. So having that preparation piece, because that new UEI number takes about 6 weeks to obtain.
What's the acronym?
UEI,
What's the acronym?
unique identifier indicator. SAMS.gov will give you all the information in regards to that. I thought I'd mention that because that's a big piece that is going to be rolling out across the United States. A lot of people kind of went unnoticed when it went into effect to the background, but I know guys are working on to really work with our present customers and make sure they get that information out.
And just to add, one of the things I learned in getting educated about this, that it's being rolled out through the Defense Logistic Agency. So if you get a UEI number, you're actually qualified to source government business. So I know we're talking about exports here, but with the UEI number, you can bid on government work.
And the US government, as you know, is the largest buyer in the world. So, yeah.
Not the quickest payer in the world.
Well, that's why we got insurance, right?
One last question, Carlos.
Yes, one last question I was waiting for. You stated something about 3 minutes ago, it captured my attention. You said exporting to Africa is not cheap. That's what actually is putting America in a little bit of disadvantage when it comes to Asian market. This might be policy-related question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is EXIM doing to change that? Because based on the high cost, I might actually take the risk of ship and then have to deal with it if it's going to cost too much. At the same time, I'm being beaten by competition from China and India and elsewhere. And I can't even do much business with my American partners because of those conditions.
Because of the cost.
Yeah.
Now, what goes into the actual cost is basically worked on by our economists. And, they have algorithms they use to identify cost perspective. Now, when it comes to that from a policy standpoint, as I said before, when we're dealing with the American taxpayers' dollars, we have to be really prudent with that. Does it err on the side of caution too much? It probably does. But if I'm a casino and I'm gambling with your money, wouldn't you want me to make sure I have insurance of a repayment or winning that particular casino rather than just saying, well, it might not. So yeah, keeping that in mind, when people talk about the risk of different countries, that's what I talk about. It's the taxpayers' dollars we're actually working with. And we can't be frivolous in the way we do that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be around. Okay. All right. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I appreciate